I'm Konstantine, I'm a partner at Sequoia Capital, and have been in the AI space for quite some time, 13 years, believe it or not, like since undergraduate. Have been in the AI space, compelled by it, and this is a pretty exciting moment for everyone, and so I'm very, very excited to bring two brilliant founders in different parts of the AI space doing very, very important things in the AI space. So Daniela and Hema are truly brilliant in different ways and in different types of companies. And so the first thing that I'd like to ask you both is to please introduce yourselves. Just a 60-second intro, who you are, what your company is, what you guys are doing there, and then we'll go from there. So Danielle?
Whoops.
Oh,
okay.
I got that.
Thank you. Okay, I guess to start off, I'm Daniela. I'm the president at Anthropic. Just a very kind of quick background about me. I actually originally started my career working in global health, spent time working in politics, both on a campaign and then later on Capitol Hill. And I moved to work in Silicon Valley just about 10 years ago, almost to the day. I took a job at a very tiny startup at the time called Stripe that was about 40 people, and was there for about 5.5 years, really had the opportunity to grow and scale people and business teams in my time there. And then moved to work at OpenAI in 2018 and did something really similar across research, engineering, business, and people teams. And I co-founded Anthropic along with my 6 co-founders. We started in very, very late 2020, so we've been around for just over 2 years. And Anthropic's mission is really to build reliable, steerable, and interpretable AI systems that really have humans at the center of them.
Amazing. Hema.
I'm Hema Raghavan, and I'm a co-founder and I head engineering at Kumo AI. I started my career in text, natural language processing, question answering a couple of decades ago, and a very different world in the tech space back then. Over the last decade or so, I've been working with graph and graph neural networks, and Kumo is about a 1.5-year old company, and our tagline is to query the future. We actually aim to make querying the future, that is building predictions, as easy as it is to do SQL today. So today you can go to your data warehouse and actually ask a question like how many users are going to churn, or how many users churned last week. And what Kumo will makes it just as easy to do is answer the question about how many users will churn next week. And you can ask many different questions in a very SQL-like interface. So we want to make AI easy and accessible for many different audiences.
Very cool. Now Hema mentioned natural language processing. This is the OG LLM. I think it's fair to say you've been looking at that for a long time. I understand that when you worked in a lab back in the day, there was a neighboring robot with the same name as Hema.
And Hema couldn't stand. And I got a lot of flack for that. So we've come a long way in the general AI space. I was in the NLP lab, and that was the robotics lab, and Hema couldn't stand. She stood for hierarchical embedded, I forget what the full acronym was.
Amazing. Well, this Hema can stand. She can also run a great AI company. So it's a killer combo. If both of you were not running an AI company, what would you be doing? Daniela.
I think if I weren't running Anthropic, 2 answers. So
yes.
The first is I actually really loved the work I did in global health. I didn't have the skills then to be as impactful as I wanted to, but after getting the chance to grow my skills in tech, I might go back and do something there. The other answer is that I would love to coach a high school football team. A funny story about me, I know a little gauche in Silicon Valley. I'm a huge sports fan, and I love coaching, management, and development, and I would really love to do that in just a totally different context.
So the real-life Ted Lasso right
yes,
here.
Yes.
And we will talk about that in the culture section.
That's great.
Hema? An AI startup.
Yes.
Yeah.
So if I weren't building an AI company, I still think I'd be doing something with AI, because I've spent 2 decades in the field. I think there's just a lot more to be done, and I wouldn't want to leave at this moment in time. But just like you, I love coaching, I love mentoring. Konstantine, I was telling you, I love mastering my headstand.
Yes.
So maybe I'll be doing some of that. But beyond that, I think I'd still be, taking AI to, the next level. It may not be building a company, but in some other way.
Very cool. Okay. I want to double click on your taglines as businesses. So they mentioned it a little bit in passing. You guys are obviously one of the leading LLM providers in the world. But one thing that's different about you is this concept of constitutional AI. Has everyone heard this concept? Is this something we're pretty familiar with? Maybe you can rehash it and tell us a little bit about that. And then Hema, this concept of querying the future or predicting the future. And then maybe you can show us how these two connect as well.
Sure. Yeah, I think maybe even backing up kind of a step from constitutional AI, really the kind of way that the safety research and work that we're working on at Anthropic, we've really sort of seen in Claude, which is the product that we push to market, is this kind of framework of being helpful, honest, and harmless. And constitutional AI is really an approach to achieving that through a different sort of system of training. And normally reinforcement learning from human feedback, which is something that our team also sort of co-developed, is the sort of standard approach for doing it right now. But constitutional AI really aims to use kind of what we call a constitution of norms when training large generative models for helping them to achieve that kind of HHH set of goals.
Cool. And HHH.
Helpful, honest, harmless.
And the fourth H?
Oh yeah, I have this is an internal thing, but I kind of think that we should add a fourth H, which is humor. Claude is really, really funny. If you've had a chance to play around with it, makes great jokes, mostly dad jokes, but very good dad jokes.
It is funny. I hear that it has a large database. Dad, that was a joke. Dad. Okay.
That was really good.
There we go.
It's a Claude joke right there.
That's a Claude joke.
Yeah, so the goal of Kumo is to help you query the future, right? And if you take a look at how data sits in your enterprise today, it's largely in data warehouses, and building a machine learning pipeline today on your data warehouses is onerous. It could take 3 to 6 months to still build a initial prediction. We want enterprises to be able to try AI in all different parts of their product. So you need to shrink that time to, bring your first model out, and that's what Kumo aims to do. With a very simple predictive query-like interface, we enable you to be able to create a first model in a matter of few hours or a day, and be able to stick it into your product, right? And we want you to capitalize all the data, that's the petabytes of data that's sitting in your data warehouse. And that's, the Kumo promise. I think I want to bring, I said I spent about 2 decades in the, text space.
Yeah.
And we used to do manual feature engineering in the early 2000s. I was telling Konstantine, I was trying to fit part of speech tags into a 512 MB machine, and we used to just have to manually squeeze the juice out of that, right? And where are we today? So can we take that same journey for enterprise data? That's what Kumo aims to do.
Cool. So you're taking massive amounts of enterprise data, Hema, and you're helping, one thing that's very captivating to me is you're helping enterprises treat a database of past data the same way that they might treat the future. So there's this common thread between both of you of prediction. So maybe you can walk me through what that means and spell that out for the audience so that they understand what predicting the future looks like for an enterprise database. And then talk a little bit about your customers, who they are, what they look like, why they would be using this. And then same for you, Daniela.
Okay. So let's start with an example
Yes.
of a customer. I think it's always great to start with an example. An example could be a marketplace, a customer who has buyers and sellers, and one of our customers is in that space. And they want to be able to determine, what's the next best action, right? And that could be a predictive problem that they want, and based on that, they might want to send a marketing campaign, an email, or be able to actually even, personalize the app experience. All of those are predictions, and we enable all of those predictions to be done in a matter of a day. So that's the Kumo product. And the underlying technology is graph neural networks, which we think is, which basically subsumes a lot of the, the RNNs, CNNs and LSTM architectures, and allows us to capture the relational structure that exists in these data warehouses.
We will visit that again a little later. I think it's a super powerful concept. Yeah. Daniela?
For our part, our customers really range. So businesses of all sizes, so everything from brand new startups to household name companies can make use of Claude, right, of these very powerful generative AI systems. And the other is individuals. So on the kind of business side, some of our early users have included Notion, Assembly AI, Robin AI, and Junie. And on the kind of individual consumer side, if you've seen Quora's Poe app, that's partly fueled by OpenAI and partly fueled by Claude from Anthropic. And then just today, actually, we released Claude in Slack. And so any workspace now has the ability to integrate it as an app. So you can use Claude as a helpful, friendly assistant to do things like summarize threads or help answer questions, click on links, things like that.
I have been using Claude in Slack for months now. I hope it can say that. And I can say it does live up to the hype. It's very, very good. It may or may not make its way into the memos I write, but that's off the record. So this idea of prediction, just want to double click on this a little bit more for both of your companies, because as I listened this morning, as I listened this afternoon, and as I think about my own AI training, a lot of artificial intelligence is based on this concept of predicting the future in different ways. I mean, what you've built with Claude, what's being built in LLMs are autoregressive models that are predicting the next token based on massive context windows. What you're building are basically predictions about user actions based on relational data in a graph. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about where we are in the evolution of the overall AI revolution and where you think we're going to be going next. Each of you from different perspectives. Maybe whoever would like to jump in first.
Go ahead.
Okay. So
very polite group here.
So I think in terms of, I think the AI for multimedia data is in a journey ahead of where it is for enterprise data today, in the sense that we've gotten to the place that we have these transformer models, this scaling. We have enough evidence out there about, and we have applications booming, right? Like this, I mean, all of the talks this morning are all about applications that are booming. And I want to remind ourselves that this did not happen overnight. It was several decades of work that actually, brought us to this inflection point. I think with relational data, with enterprise data, we're, I want to say halfway through that journey, in the sense that we've seen lots of wins in some. So the Kumo co-founders are from Pinterest, Airbnb, LinkedIn, and a lot of our founding team are from B2C consumer companies, and we've seen wins of this technology in these spaces, right? So we want to actually bring that to the broader enterprise. We've made inroads into making compute cheaper for graph neural networks. I think the myth was that they were not cheap, and that was the case for transformers. Maybe, I mean, they're still not cheap, but at least you can scale them out, right? And now we've gotten to the place where we can scale them out. So we're getting there, and we're starting to see some pretty good wins in the GNN journey. And I think the transformer journey is, I'll let you jump on that one. Yeah.
Thanks. I think, from my perspective, sort of similarly, to Hema, I think in some ways, like the kind of generative AI, revolution is here, right? We, so many people probably, in the audience would say, oh, we're at this inflection point. And I think that's absolutely true, right? We're starting to see large language models be able to do many things, right, that we didn't think were possible even a year ago or a couple of years ago. But I also think in some ways we're still really early in the journey, right? There's a lot of things that these systems still can't do, right? Hallucination is still a big problem. And I think there's really quite a lot of potential directions that these technologies can go in. And I think That can happen both at the sort of foundation layer, right, of developing more powerful models. Our team is sort of known for doing some really interesting work on a topic called scaling laws, which is a paper that we published in sort of early 2020 that basically says that as models kind of get more resources, right, as they're given more compute, they're just going to get more powerful. And I think that's really been borne out kind of in the past year, 2 years, 6 months. But my sense is that that's kind of the sort of training layer. And then there's this other layer of what do you do with these powerful models? And I think we're still very, very early in that journey. And unsurprisingly, a lot of that innovation is being driven by smaller companies and early stage tech companies, but also a lot of the larger tech companies I think have a really important role to play in this too. And I'm very curious to see how things like major tech company assistants improve with kind of the development of these large models and having them kind of go to scale.
So let's talk about that David versus Goliath type of situation for both of you. I mean, in the case of Anthropic, you guys are really competing against the biggest players in the world. These are trillion-dollar companies that are building LLMs. In the case of Kumo, you guys are up against AutoML at also the biggest companies in the world who can throw a ton of resources against this problem. Why are you going up against that? What makes you think that you can win? What's the end state of this whole AI problem 5 or 10 years from now?
I'll go first this time. Yeah, I think it's a great question. My sense is that the generative AI space is going to be really large, right, as kind of a segment of the economy. And so I think while the large companies will, of course, capture some of that value, I would be sort of surprised if there were not room for quite a lot of innovation. And I think, it's kind of the story of any major company, right? Depending, people said the same thing about Stripe. They're like, PayPal has this on lock. How could you possibly improve on kind of payment processing? I don't think that, I think everyone here today would agree that that wasn't true at the time. And so I think because we're still fairly early in this journey, there's a lot of room for innovative, small, nimble, creative, hardworking companies, just like in any industry, to come in and disrupt and innovate. And I think in a lot of cases, those are often the companies that are actually driving the innovation, right? Because there's more of a desire to create and to innovate versus sort of maintaining the status quo.
Totally. That is good news for all of you out there building companies.
Yeah. So I think let's talk about creativity, right? So I think larger companies may have deep pockets, but oftentimes they're boxed in terms of creativity because you have a product line, you've created swim lanes, and you're trying to streamline that production line for what's your revenue stream, right? Which basically means teams are just focused on something super narrow, and creativity comes at the intersection of areas and boundaries. And that's a large reason why bigger companies fail to innovate. So creativity is with the younger players, right? And the scrappiness, and sometimes scrappiness actually gives room for creativity, right? Like at Kumo, we actually, someone talked about not having GPU resources early in the cloud, early enough in the cloud. That really made us innovate in terms of how we thought of our model training architectures and so on, right?
Your investors are cheap. That's what I'm hearing. I am her investor.
So in that scrappiness, also there is innovation. But I think that's, even if I compare to about a couple of decades ago, what happened was innovation was restricted to universities, and then, there was research labs. But now I think venture funding is also realizing that hard tech just needs breathing room and space to build out, and I think that change has been extremely refreshing. So I think that, we've seen some of the players, that are talked about here, just coming from the fact that, some of the venture funds are willing to take that big bet to, because you need that horsepower, that, compute resources, the teams to actually build that. So I think, it's good times to be a startup and solving hard problems.
venture funding, would recommend. No, I'm kidding.
Yes.
Also joking. Hema, are you able to talk at all about the cost advantages? I don't know if you're able to or not, but you guys have become world leaders in graph neural networks in short order and have significant cost advantages against some of those trillion-dollar companies. I don't know the Anthropic benchmarks, but I'm sure they're also incredibly impressive. Are you able to talk about any of that? If not, we'll move on to the next question.
I can talk in terms of, at a high level, about tech innovations.
Yep.
So, the assumptions we used to make with graph neural networks in particular was, graphs are just hard to distribute. So when you think of text, you can chunk up your text and put it on different machines, and you can train a model on that. And then you can move data around, but during gradient descent. But graphs are just so inherently, there's no natural separation. So you would think that you have to stuff everything into memory. And we've innovated, we've come up with something called compute-compute separation internally, which just lets us separate out some of the CPU compute into the and the GPU compute, and it just came from the scrappiness of AWS costs for an early stage startup are still pretty expensive, and somebody talked about people having brokered deals. So it took us a while to prove ourselves and get to that. So I think, so without revealing costs, I think
amazing.
we've innovated to actually keep costs down.
It's very impressive. And by the way, you guys as well, I was talking with your co-founder about this last week. You guys have hit way above your weight class against these big players, building great models, kind of on a budget. I mean, yes, it's expensive, but on a relative basis on a budget. Any comments on how you guys do it or how you plan to keep doing it?
Yeah, definitely. Only in this context would you say on a budget, but yes, I hear you in comparison.
It is tens of millions of dollars. It is
very
a lot
expensive.
of money.
But I think there's sort of the the technical side, which probably my research director would kill me if I shared too much there. But there's obviously technical innovations that we kind of lean into. But I also think there's just kind of a kind of cultural approach, right? Which is we sort of have this theme at Anthropic of where it's a very scientific founded research team, right?
Yes.
Folks who come from, physics PhDs, neuroscience backgrounds, and my impression is that there's this almost we have this internal culture thing, right? Where just do the dumb simple thing that works.
Yes.
And I think in a lot of cases there can be a desire for innovation to be something extremely fancy and creative, and often the biggest kind of innovations really come from just doing simple things that work effectively. That's true on the research side, but really also on the how do we work together, how do we communicate, how do we partner together. Some of those things don't need to be fancy and complicated.
Totally agree. And both of these companies, the teams are technically brilliant. And I do not use that lightly, technically incredibly deep across both of your founding stacks. You guys are doing the closest thing to rocket science. I guess SpaceX, does the closest thing. But the closest thing to quantum physics, okay, maybe not quantum physics either, but you know what I mean. In computer science out there, it is truly amazing. But one thing that you both have said that you have in common is that sometimes it is the simpler things done incredibly well. Yeah. And this is something that I've noticed over the past several years in AI. It is sometimes the crazy, non-obvious ideas that actually work really, really well. I don't think a lot of experts thought that transformers would take us as humanity as far as they have taken us. So maybe a comment on that, and then a comment on graph neural networks and where you think that those will take us as well.
So I can start with the graph neural networks and where we're headed today, right? So I think in terms of a modeling paradigm, which is relevant across your enterprise, right? So if you think about the average enterprise, you have, people entities, you have transactions, you have the loans, or you might have clicks. So, most enterprises have that kind of data. It seems obvious. I mean, you store it in a relational database, but it seems obvious when you visualize it, it's all a graph, right? And what Kumo's done is actually made it easy to materialize that graph and actually run predictive queries on top of that. From a, scientific innovation perspective, where we've made inroads, but we'll keep pushing the bar. There is actually scalability and the auto ML piece, right? Like how do you actually, do a model architecture search? How do you keep compute costs cheap? And we'll keep, moving ahead on that. I think on the Kumo side as well, I do want to add that we do have one of the best open source libraries. We do maintain one of the best open source libraries for graph neural networks. It's called PyTorch Geometric. And actually that is our, a huge community of contributors that come in from researchers from all over the world. So, we have that. So we're a lean startup, but then we are actually leveraging the entire research community by maintaining this open source platform and actually bringing in all the innovation, all the goodness that's coming in papers there. And that lets us leverage, scientific innovation as well and bring it to the enterprise. So that's the way we see all of this play out. We'll keep innovating and we'll keep maintaining our open source to bring in scientific innovation.
It's amazing.
Yeah. I think maybe on our side, I would point to the value of having a really incredible technical research team that communicates really well and effectively with very impressive product people and product leaders and business folks. And I think, here it's like a little bit of a balancing act, right? But my impression is that Anthropic has a very impressive set of researchers coming from a broad range of backgrounds, and we've been really sort of pleasantly surprised the degree to which having this kind of environment where researchers can thrive and where safety research, which I think is sort of one of the areas we're best known for, right? We've published over 15 papers across a variety of different disciplines about how to make AI more reliable, more steerable, more interpretable, and I don't necessarily think that that's unsynonymous with, a technology company, right? A company that's also thinking about how to take that research and turn it into something very practical and valuable that people can really use. And so it's kind of a particular take on this kind of innovation question, but I think something about the way we've sort of structured the organization seems to be really supporting a lot of our deeper goals.
Well, time flies when you're talking to brilliant founders. We are almost at time, and we're going to open it up to everyone. I'm sure a lot of people had questions for these two, but I'm going to ask permission to ask one final question because I know this about them. I think that it will be a really fascinating answer, if that's okay with everyone. You both are culture carriers. You're both founders and co-founders of your companies. They're both amazing, brilliant AI companies, and you have set yourselves apart within those companies as really important culture carriers. Can you tell me a little bit about what you've done in order to do that, what that culture is like, and how you foster that sense of leadership in your companies?
You go. Okay. I think, first of all, always dangerous to ask a founder about culture. We'll talk forever. But on the briefer side, I really think a couple of things sort of about Anthropic culture that stand out to me. The first is really this sort of interdisciplinarity that I've been talking about. So we just have folks who are really talented and impressive who come from a wide range of different backgrounds. We have sort of what we joke is the physicist pipeline of folks who have PhDs or were professors in physics who are excited to get into ML, and we've trained them up and found them to be really incredible contributors. But also former neuroscientists and biologists, but also, product leaders and software engineers and incredible developers who are excited to kind of turn this technology into something that people can really use, and business leaders, policymakers, right? We're a highly interdisciplinary company. But I think the thing that unites all of those people to want to be at Anthropic is the mission, right? They're there because they really care about ensuring that the impacts of what we're building are positive, right? And that what we are doing is promoting something that's truly safe. And I think the last thing I'll say there is that there's sort of a maturity to the company itself. I think some of that comes from the fact that the founding team, we're all in our 30s and 40s. Many of us have families, and so I think there's a way that there's just, it's not the first company we've ever worked at before, and we've learned a lot of the lessons about what to do and not do at a quickly scaling company, right? at the beginning of the year, I wrote a document basically I originally actually just wrote it for myself as like shower thoughts, and then I shared it with the leadership team, and then they said, actually, you should share this with the whole company. And it basically just said, here's what we should expect is going to happen in 2023 from a growth perspective for the organization, right? I said, things are gonna start to get weird around 100 people, 110 people, right? It's gonna get harder to communicate. We have to communicate more. The following things are gonna feel thrashy, right? There's just lessons that I've learned from doing this twice before and going through that sort of phase of hyper growth that we don't have to reinvent the wheel, right? There's things about us that are unique, but there's also things about us that really translate to any quickly growing startup. And rather than making each mistake again, my hope is that we can kind of leapfrog some of those too.
So I think, Daniela, you said almost everything I would have said. I think hire great people. I think people aligned with the mission of the company. On the Kumo side as well, we indexed on people, with experience. So people who had built things in their, previous companies, and we had people, new college graduates, but we also had, experienced people. And we also wanted to create a culture that was inclusive for that stage of life that they were in, right? So we have a lot of babies. I have 2 young kids. So, we created a culture where you can work hard, but you actually even, you're able to support that, the surrounding system that comes with it, right? And so we created a culture. We actually wrote our, value statement. We love graphs, so everything has to do with graphs. So we just said, we're like nodes in a network, better together. And that's our, our tagline, and we remind ourselves of that, continuously, right? In decision-making frameworks and everything that, what's the best decision for the company? Let's move forward. Let's take the shortest path first. We're a team, right? And that's the Kumo culture.
You are 2 amazing nodes that I'm grateful to have in my graph. Just brilliant leaders, wonderful culture leaders. Thank you so much for the time, Hema and Daniela. And last question, are Kumo and Anthropic open to partnerships and customers?
Yes.
Of course.
Okay, there we go. No surprise there. Thank you both. Please join me in thanking these amazing panelists.